The woman at the glass door. The morning sun peeked through the tall buildings of the city, spilling golden light across the sidewalk. People walked past without noticing the woman standing quietly in front of the massive glass doors of one of the most powerful banks in the country. She looked out of place, too ordinary for a place like this. She wore a plain cream-colored cotton dress, wrinkled from travel, with a small brown handbag hanging gently from her shoulder. Her shoes were simple flats, slightly dusty from the road. Her eyes, though tired, held a quiet fire like someone who had come not to ask but to claim. Her name was Sophia. She was a foreigner in this country. She had no accent strong enough to label her. No jewels, no makeup, no designer clothes. Just her truth and a few papers in her bag. She stood before the security guard, who looked her up and down like she was a lost tourist. His walkie-talkie crackled, but his voice cut through sharper. "Ma'am, this place is not open to the public. You don't allow visitors without appointments," he said firmly, stepping slightly in front of the door. Sophia looked up at him calmly, then reached into her bag and pulled out a neatly folded document. "I'm not a visitor," she said gently. "It's about my ownership. I believe there is a mistake inside. I'd like to speak to someone from the legal department, please." The guard's eyes narrowed. He didn't even look at the paper. He chuckled a little and tilted his head toward the receptionist's desk inside the lobby behind the thick glass. Go ahead. But don't expect much." Sophia nodded and stepped into the lobby. Inside, the atmosphere changed. Marble floors reflected the lights above. Soft jazz music played through invisible speakers. The air smelled of cologne and money. Behind the long reception counter sat two women with perfect hair, perfectly bored expressions, and expensive watches on their wrists. As Sophia approached, one of them raised her eyebrows and gave a customer service smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes?" the woman asked. Sophia handed over the papers. "I'm here to speak with someone regarding this. I believe there is a property registration error connected to this bank's ownership history. I need someone from the management team." The receptionist glanced at the papers with a quick flick of her eyes, then placed them down without reading. She pressed a button on her phone. "Security, please escort a lady from the lobby. Possible misunderstanding." "Excuse me," Sophia said, still calm. "I flew 12 hours to get here. I've made this journey 3 times now. These papers prove my family had a rightful share in the founding of this bank. There's land, ownership records that were overlooked when the company expanded in the early 90s. I'm not making a claim. I'm defending what was never removed legally." The other receptionist leaned in with a little smirk. "Ma'am, our legal department doesn't deal with rumors or internet stories. If you think you found a loophole on Reddit or something," Sophia shook her head. "My grandfather didn't use Reddit. He used a pen. And I have the original signatures." At that moment, a man in a sharp navy suit walked by and paused. He looked important, not because of how expensive his clothes were, but how people seemed to part when he walked. He looked at Sophia, then at the paper on the desk. "What's going on here?" he asked. The receptionist jumped in before Sophia could speak. "Oh, nothing serious, Mr. Nolan. Just a visitor with some unusual claim." Sophia looked at him. "My name is Sophia. I'm here to speak with someone from legal or executive leadership about a potential misattribution in ownership from the original incorporation of this bank. These documents suggest my grandfather's estate was not properly accounted for in the final records." Mr. Nolan took the papers. His face was unreadable. He didn't laugh. He read, slowly, carefully. Then he looked at her with a small nod. "Wait here." The room grew still. The receptionist looked annoyed. After 10 minutes, a tall woman in a tailored gray suit appeared. Her name badge read Marianne Wexley, Executive Counsel. She didn't greet Sophia. She looked directly at the papers and then at Sophia's face, as if trying to match them to something she couldn't believe. "You say these are originals?" Marianne asked. "Yes," Sophia replied. "Certified copies exist in my embassies. Records. I can provide the reference numbers. The estate documents were filed in my country after the passing of my grandfather. It includes land deeds that were leased to a smaller credit association. that later merged into this bank. Marianne's voice was cold. Why are you coming now? This bank has operated for 30 years. No one has ever heard of your grandfather, because we didn't have the full picture, Sophia said, her voice soft but unwavering. Until my father passed away, we didn't know about the file hidden in his old study. It was behind a drawer. Inside were letters and contracts. Some were signed by the very founders of this bank. Marianne's expression hardened. Mrs. Sophia corrected gently. Marianne blinked. Mrs. Sophia. This isn't how you approach legal matters in our country. We have procedures. You can't just show up at a corporate office with ancient papers and expect us to take it seriously. I understand, said Sophia. What? But I've already filed. With your registry board, this is not the beginning. This is the follow-up. Marianne hesitated. She looked at Mr. Nolan. They exchanged a look. Something in the documents had shaken them, but they didn't want to show it then. The laughter began, from behind. 3 men in suits who had overheard everything chuckled as they passed by. One of them leaned close and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, maybe she thinks she's the secret owner of the moon too. The others laughed. One clapped sarcastically. Sophia didn't flinch. She stood tall, not angry, not defensive. Just still. The receptionist smirked. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this sounds? Do you know how many scammers try things like this every month? Sophia turned toward her, her voice still calm. Yes, and I know how easy it is to laugh at someone who looks like me. Not dressed like a shareholder. But I didn't come here to impress you. The laughter faded a little. Marianne raised her hand. Enough. We'll take the documents for a review. But I'm not making promises. I don't want promises, said Sophia. I want facts. Fine, said Marianne. You'll hear from us in 2 weeks. Thank you, Sophia replied, and turned to leave. As she walked out of the lobby, heads turned again. Some people watched with mild curiosity, some with mild pity. Others just ignored her like she was background noise. Outside, she paused for a moment and pulled out her phone. She didn't cry. She didn't sigh. She just typed one message and sent it. They laughed. Again, I did what I could. Your turn now. Back in the boardroom, Marianne stared at the papers. These signatures, they match. And if what she's saying is true. The land used for the first 2 branches wasn't legally transferred. It was leased, not sold. Nolan said nothing. He picked up the phone slowly. Who are you calling? Marianne asked. Nolan looked at her husband. Marianne frowned. She's married. Yes, he said. To who? Nolan's voice dropped. Someone whose name is on the list of our largest shareholders. Marianne's hand froze in the air. What did you just say? Before Nolan could respond, the glass doors of the bank lobby slid open again. A black car pulled up. A tall man in a sleek black suit stepped out. His presence silent but heavy. Even the guards stood up straighter. A hush fell over the lobby as he walked in. Someone whispered his name, and Marianne's face turned pale. She whispered under her breath, "That's her husband." The man walked past the stunned receptionist, past the men who had laughed, past everyone. He said nothing then. He stopped at the front desk, looked directly into the receptionist's eyes, and said quietly, "Bring me everyone who laughed." The man they didn't recognize it. Sound of his polished shoes echoed softly across the marble floor, each step landing with quiet authority. No shouting, no raised voice. Just a presence that made people feel like the air had shifted. The receptionist who had earlier mocked Sophia now stood frozen, her fake smile drained from her face. The laughing executives near the coffee machine slowly lowered their cups. Even the security guard who had brushed Sophia off earlier took a cautious step back. The man's name was Elias, but no one in that bank lobby dared speak it aloud yet. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a custom-made black suit that seemed to catch the light in just the right way. He had the kind of face you didn't forget, calm, thoughtful, yet impossibly intimidating. His dark eyes swept the room like they were measuring something far beyond appearances. He didn't look like someone who belonged to a woman like Sophia, or so the people in the room thought. Because in their eyes, a woman like her didn't belong. In their world, but they were wrong. So very wrong. Marianne Wexley stepped forward, trying to regain control of the moment. "Sir," she began, clearing her throat. "May I help you?" Elias didn't look at her. He turned toward the receptionist instead. "You saw a woman come in this morning? She brought you legal documents. You laughed." The receptionist stammered. I didn't laugh, sir. I didn't mean bring me everyone who laughed," he repeated, his voice low but unshakably firm. Marianne stepped in quickly. "With all due respect, mister," he finally turned his gaze on her. Just one glance, and she fell silent. It was the look of someone used to commanding boardrooms across continents. A man who didn't speak to prove power, he already had it. "You know who I am?" he said softly. Marianne nodded, her mouth dry. "Yes, mister. Elias Norwood. You're one of our major shareholders?" "I am not one of," he corrected. I am the majority silent shareholder. I have remained silent for years because I believed in the dignity of the institution. But this morning, you laughed at my wife. So now I speak." The receptionist nearly collapsed into her chair. Marianne's voice faltered. "Sir, we didn't?" "No. She didn't mention she didn't need to mention me," he said, his voice now lined with something sharper. "You should have listened to her, not judged her by her shoes." Hush fell over the lobby. Nearby staff froze mid-movement. Even the guard by the entrance seemed unsure of what to do. Elias took a step forward, placing the folded legal documents gently on the front desk. "Do you know what's in these?" he asked, looking around. "These papers prove that this bank stands on land that was never fully transferred. It was leased by a man named Raphael Devereaux, my wife's grandfather. He trusted the people he signed those papers with, but his name vanished from the records. No payments. No closure. Nothing." Marianne's voice cracked. "But that was decades ago. ... "Well, so was dignity," Elias replied. "But apparently you forgot that too." He turned to the three executives who had laughed the loudest earlier. Like one of them, a man named Bradley, stepped back instinctively, but Elias pointed at him. "You," he said, "you mocked my wife. You didn't know who she was. You didn't care. Do you know what she did for 3 years? She traveled between countries. She traced old land records. She visited archives, spoke with old employees, translated legal documents in languages she didn't even speak, just to prove something that should have been respected in the first place." The man said nothing. Elias leaned closer. "She did all that alone. Not once did she ask for my help. Not once did she use my name. Because she believed in the truth, not the power behind it." He straightened up and turned to Marianne. "Get your legal team. Now, you're going to sit down with her, and this time, you're going to listen." Marianne nodded quickly, signaling to the assistant nearby, but Elias wasn't done. He took out his phone and placed it on the receptionist's desk. A screen lit up with a live video call already in progress. "Say hello to the chairman of your board," he said. The receptionist's mouth dropped. A silver-haired man in a suit appeared on the screen, eyebrows raised. "Elias," the man said. "Surprised to what do we owe? They mocked my wife," Elias said. "They called her a scammer. She came with proof, and they threw her out." The chairman's face grew tense. "Is that true?" Elias didn't answer. Instead, he turned the camera toward the receptionist and the executives, all now staring at the phone as if it were a bomb about to go off. The chairman's voice was calm but deadly. "I want everyone involved in this to report to my office today at 3 o'clock. And Elias Dell, your wife, we will handle this personally. We will not allow her to be disrespected like this again." Elias ended the call. "Now," he said, "go get her. She's waiting outside." One of the assistants rushed out as the doors slid open again. Sunlight poured into the room, and there stood Sophia, exactly where she had been 10 minutes earlier. Quiet, still, holding nothing but her handbag and the truth. As she stepped back into the bank, the silence deepened. No one spoke. Some lowered their eyes. Others couldn't stop staring. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She walked with the same grace as before, calm, humble, and unshaken. Elias turned to her and offered his hand. She took it gently. Marianne stepped forward, trying to recover her tone. "Mrs. Norwood, Please follow me to the conference room. We're ready to discuss everything. Sophia nodded. Thank you. But first I'd like to know who laughed. I'd like to hear them say they're sorry. Not for me, but for every person who looks like me, dresses like me, and walks into this building with nothing but the truth. Bradley, the executive, opened his mouth, then closed it again. The receptionist looked down. None of them spoke. Not ready yet? Sophia asked. Then we can wait, because I'm not going anywhere this time. The words hung in the air like a sword suspended above the room. Then suddenly, one of the junior analysts, barely 25, in a too-big suit and shaking hands, stepped forward. Ma'am, he said, eyes full of regret. I'm sorry. I laughed. Not because I thought you were lying, but because I'm used to people in this building treating outsiders like they don't belong. I followed that habit without thinking. Sophia looked at him. Her eyes were steady. She nodded slowly. Thank you, she said. You told the truth. I respect that. Then finally, one by one, others followed. I'm sorry, I misjudged. Didn't read, I assumed. Some said nothing, just lowered their heads in shame. Elias wrapped his arm around Sophia's shoulder, not as a gesture of dominance, but of quiet pride. Marianne cleared her throat again. Please, let's go inside. They entered the executive conference room, glass walls, mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling views of the skyline. But for once, the power in the room didn't come from the height of the tower or the wealth of the bank. It came from a woman in a cotton dress, who had walked through 3 countries and passed countless doors just to be heard. As she sat down, she placed her documents on the table. Shall we begin? Marianne opened her folder, but before she could speak, her phone buzzed. A notification. Sophia's name was trending online. An anonymous video had gone viral. Someone had filmed the confrontation in the lobby. The video showed her being dismissed, the laughter. Then her husband walking in like thunder, wrapped in silence. The world was watching now, and Sophia. She didn't flinch, but just as they prepared to begin the meeting, a knock came at the door. A young man in a courier uniform stepped in with a large envelope. Urgent delivery for Mrs. Sophia Norwood, he said. She looked puzzled. For me? He nodded and handed it over. Sophia opened the envelope slowly. Inside was another document, but it wasn't from the bank. It was from a lawyer's office in her home country. Her eyes scanned the page, then her face changed slightly, just enough for Elias to notice. What is it? He asked softly. Sophia looked up at him, her fingers gripping the paper tighter. It's about the land, she whispered. There's something we missed. Missed? Marianne asked, confused. Sophia nodded, her voice steady but filled with tension. It's not just the land under this bank. It's more, much more. And in that moment, the room froze again, because the truth they thought was already shocking. ... was only the beginning. The map beneath the surface ETH, quiet in the conference room, stretched so long that even the ticking of the antique wall clock began to feel loud. No one moved. No one spoke. All eyes were on Sophia, who sat frozen, her hands still gripping the thick envelope, as if letting go of it might unleash something bigger than anyone in the room was ready for. Her eyes moved across the pages slowly, each line she read seeming to deepen the silence even more. Elias leaned in slightly, watching her carefully. He knew her expressions better than anyone, and the one she wore now wasn't just surprise, was weight. It was the kind of realization that rearranged everything you thought you knew. Sophia, he asked softly. She finally looked up, her voice slow and deliberate. It's not just about this bank. It never was. It's about everything that came after. Marianne blinked. I don't understand. What do you mean? Sophia placed the paper down on the table, gently turning it so Marianne and the others could read. My grandfather, Raphael Devereaux, didn't just lease the land to the original credit association that became this bank. He had several holdings properties. He managed under a quiet trust. He was never flashy. He was cautious. And now I know why. She pulled out another folded document from the envelope, a faded map with handwritten marks and lines that didn't appear in any known digital archive. The paper was old, slightly yellowed with time. This is a map of his original holdings. See these red marks? They represent parcels of land he leased to different small institutions, most of them community banks and financial cooperatives. Many of them no longer exist. They were absorbed into bigger banks during mergers in the late 90s. Marianne's brow furrowed as she looked closer. Are you saying? Yes, Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't just a case of one bank ignoring an old agreement. This is a network, a hidden foundation under the entire financial structure of this city. My grandfather was one of the unseen builders, and he left a trail. The problem is nobody ever gave him credit. Not in the records, not in the ownership logs, nothing. Ain't. Of the legal assistant stood up suddenly. But that would mean, Sophia nodded. It means entire sections of this city might be sitting on land that was never lawfully transferred. It means all the financial growth that came from those foundations was built on a debt no one ever paid back. Marianne reached for her phone. This is a legal earthquake. If what you're saying is true, it is, Sophia said gently, pulling out the notarized statements. This document comes from a historian who cross-checked land deeds from that period. The mistake wasn't just an accident. It was buried. Intentionally. Someone knew what they were doing. The room fell cold. Elias, still calm, leaned back and crossed his arms. Now do you see why she didn't need me to speak for her? She came armed with history, and history always speaks for itself. Marianne's voice trembled slightly. This could bring down institutions. Sophia nodded slowly. Maybe. Or maybe it can force them to do the right thing before it's too late. Just then the conference room door creaked open again. A senior board member entered. His face was pale, his hands gripping a leather folder. He looked directly at Sophia. Mrs. Norwood, he said, struggling to maintain composure. We've just been notified that a financial blogger, one with a massive following, has somehow obtained copies of your grandfather's map. We're publishing a piece right now, spreading like wildfire. The headline says, it's the woman who owns half the city and didn't even know it. Everyone turned to Sophia. She sat still, absorbing the news like someone who'd expected it all along. She didn't flinch. She didn't glow with pride. Looked tired. This wasn't about ownership, she said softly. Not for me. Not at first. I just wanted the truth acknowledged. I didn't want lawsuits or scandal. I wanted peace. You may not have a choice now, Elias said, his voice quiet but steady. Once the public knows, the institutions will scramble. Some will deny, others will try to settle. But the world already sees you. The board members sat down slowly, clearly shaken. Mrs. Norwood, this is no longer just a private matter. Regulators are going to get involved. There will be headlines. As investors, shareholders. I hope you're prepared. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. I wasn't prepared for people to laugh in my face when I spoke the truth, but they did. I stayed. I'm still here, so you sign prepared. Marianne, now visibly sweating, cleared her throat again. Do you intend to press charges or pursue full legal control over the assets involved? Elias looked at her, but said nothing. Sophia replied, that depends. On what? Marianne asked. On whether this bank is willing to make things right before the law forces it to, she said simply. I'm not here to burn everything down. I'm here to see if anyone remembers how to stand up. There was silence, and then the board member stood again, this time with a slight bow of the head. I can't speak for every institution, but this one, we owe you a very public apology. It's in a formal negotiation session. Today, Sophia looked at Elias. He nodded once. Then let's begin, she said quietly. As the room prepared for the legal meeting, somewhere on the other side of the city, news stations had already begun flashing her face on screen. Headlines ran in bold letters, "Simple woman may hold forgotten rights to financial empire, but far away." Beyond the flashing cameras and articles, in a quiet neighborhood near the river, a woman sat watching the news unfold. Her hair was gray, her hands calloused from decades of gardening. She smiled softly, her eyes misty. Raphael, she whispered, speaking to the past. She found it. She found the truth you buried. In that moment, she stood, opened a dusty old cabinet, and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to institutions across the country, all marked unreturned. She picked up the phone. "Yes," she said to the voice on the other end. "Tell them. I'm ready to talk. The girl you laughed at isn't alone." Just like that, across cities, across borders, across time, truth began to wake from its long, deliberate sleep. The forgotten Letterson, the center of the city, the boardroom lights glowed faintly as the sun dipped beyond the skyline. The walls, made of glass and steel, once symbolized power and status. Now they felt like a stage. Behind those polished surfaces, something was unraveling, not just a legal matter, not just a financial error, but a truth so deeply buried that it had turned to myth. But myths, when given breath and voice, had a way of shaking the strongest walls. Sophia sat at the long conference table, her posture composed but not rigid. In front of her, open files lay scattered. Satellite maps, notarized contracts, land surveys, faded receipts, and letters that looked like they had traveled through decades to arrive at this moment. She wasn't the same woman who had stood outside the bank doors just hours ago, no longer ignored. Now, all eyes were fixed on her, not just with interest, but with a mix of fear and reluctant respect. Across from her, Marianne Wexley leaned back in her chair, holding a pen she hadn't used in 20 minutes. Her hands trembled slightly, her carefully applied lipstick now dry at the corners. She had been trained to handle high-stakes litigation, billion-dollar mergers, political inquiries, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this, a woman without credentials, without capital, yet armed with something far more dangerous, generational truth and proof of betrayal. "Mrs. Norwood," she said finally, her voice roughened. "By the hours of quiet tension, I must ask, how much do you intend to claim?" Sophia looked at her, calm but unblinking. "I don't want to claim what is not mine, but I will not let go of what is," Marianne exhaled. "Do you understand what this will mean if your full claims are pursued? The value of the land alone, if recalculated at current market rate, would entitle your family to damages in the billions. And the public won't see it as justice," added one of the board members, his voice full of apprehension. "They'll call it theft. Or sabotage. The media is already calling you the quiet billionaire. They won't accept that someone like you can come from nowhere and shake the foundations of their world." Sophia smiled faintly. "They already laughed when they thought I was no one. Now they fear me because I might be someone. Either way, they never listened." Then she paused and placed her hand over a small wooden box she had brought in without explanation. "But maybe they'll listen to this." She opened the box. Inside were nearly 50 old envelopes, fragile, yellowed, some opened and returned. Most marked undeliverable or no response. These, Sophia began, were written by my grandfather in the years after the mergers began. He tried to reach the banks. He sent certified letters, pleading for acknowledgement of the leases, warning that the original agreements had expiration clauses. But no one answered. They ignored him. They changed addresses. They reorganized, rebranded, and the paper trail went cold. She picked one up and read aloud. "To the Legal Department of Sunrise Cooperative Bank. Dated March 17th, 1993. My name is Raphael Devereaux. I write to remind you that the original lease of Parcel 48A expires next year. Unless the agreement is renewed or terminated formally, it cannot be considered valid.
Oh.
This land belongs to my family, and we are willing to negotiate fairly. Please. Respond." No response was ever received. Sophia looked up. He wrote dozens of these, and every one was ignored, not rejected, not disputed. Ignored. The room fell silent. Then the door opened. Elias stepped back in, his expression unreadable. But he wasn't alone. Behind him walked the elderly woman who had been watching the news from her modest riverside home, the same one who had whispered Raphael's name when the story broke. Her name was Yvette. She had been Raphael Devereaux's sister, and she'd come with her own box. No security had stopped her. No one questioned her presence. Not when Elias escorted her in. Yvette nodded at Sophia, her voice low but rich with memory. Child, he always said the truth would rise again. Even when everyone forgot him, he believed someone would carry the torch. She placed her box on the table and slowly opened it. Inside were hand-drawn land sketches, diaries, and audio recordings, one still labeled in Raphael's handwriting. For my children, they still believe in me. A tear ran down Sophia's cheek, not from sadness, but from quiet relief. It was like hearing a whisper from the past that said, "You were right to keep going." Marianne leaned forward. "We'll need to verify these documents. You'll verify nothing alone," Elias said, his voice sharp but controlled. From this point forward, Sophia's legal team will oversee every piece of analysis. You don't get to investigate the truth you tried to erase. Marianne nodded quickly. Of course. Younger legal advisor beside her leaned in and whispered something into her ear. Her eyes widened slightly. She turned back to Sophia. Norwood, there's something else. Sophia waited. Marianne took a breath. There's a sealed file in the archives, marked confidential and restricted from public view. We were told never to open it. It's been sitting untouched for over 25 years. The name on the file is Raphael Devereaux. The beat passed. Open. Sophia said. The legal advisor pulled out a sleek silver laptop and connected to the central document database. He entered several codes. With trembling fingers, he clicked open. A document appeared. Not a lease, not a contract, but a letter from the founder of the original bank that started the entire chain. It was addressed to Raphael. Dear Raphael, I know we have done wrong by you. I pushed for the buyout even when I knew the land was not ours to sell. Your trust was something we didn't deserve. You told me to stay quiet, to forget. I couldn't. I leave this letter as a confession in case the world ever remembers you. If your family ever finds this, tell them I'm sorry. Charles K. Brenner, CEO, Riverhold Bank, 1994. The room felt like it had lost all. Confession. Documented. Undeniable. Marianne closed her folder slowly. This changes everything. No, Sophia said. This confirms everything. In the days that followed, headlines shifted from curiosity to reckoning. The woman they tried to erase from laughter to liability, the bank that underestimated. Sophia Norwood, the confession that broke the silence. Investors scrambled. Lawyers panicked. Politicians called for inquiries, but Sophia didn't gloat. She didn't shout. She simply waited. And when the bank finally called her, again for an official meeting this time with senior regulators present, financial historians invited, and media watching from behind glassa, she walked in the same way. She always had, with quiet steps and louder truth. But just as the final arrangements were being drafted, compensations, official ownership acknowledgments, settlements for misuse of her grandfather's land, Sophia received a message from a name she didn't recognize, an anonymous letter with no return address. Inside was a single line: if you keep going, the truth you uncover might not just cost money, it might cost lives. Thick legal folders, high-backed chairs, and expensive pens, but nothing felt solid anymore, not after the letter. Sophia sat in the back of her car as it drove away from the bank headquarters, her fingers gently holding the note she had just received. The paper was thin, folded perfectly, and the message inside was only one sentence long. No name, no signature. Just a quiet threat wrapped in careful words. If you keep going, the truth you uncover might not just cost money, it might cost lives. Elias sat beside her, silent. He hadn't said much since she opened the envelope. Instead, his hand rested gently on her knee, not to comfort her, but to steady himself. She knew his silence wasn't fear, it was calculation. He was already mapping what this meant. Who might have sent it? And why now? This doesn't change what we started, Sophia said quietly, her eyes on the passing city lights. No, Elias replied, his voice low. But it changes what I thought we were dealing with. She turned to look at him, This was never about money, was it? He shook his head. Not anymore. Maybe it never was. They arrived at their penthouse apartment, one that Sophia had never been particularly attached to. Even now, the high ceilings and marble floors felt distant. She didn't change clothes or wash her face. She walked straight to the long wooden table in the study, laid out the new letter beside her grandfather's maps, began comparing lines, not just of land, but of history, because something had shifted. It wasn't just about unclaimed land, unpaid leases, or ignored contracts. It was about what had been built on those lands. As Sophia traced the map with her finger, she noticed something strange. Certain parcels of land her grandfather once owned had gone dark. No public records, no business history, no tax data, just black holes. And each one of those spots was now occupied by a company so secretive it didn't even have a website. Private research labs, offshore data centers, shell corporations hiding behind initials. Something deeper was buried beneath this land, and she wasn't the only one who knew. The next morning, Sophia requested a private meeting, not at the bank, not at the law firm, but at a small community center on the city's outskirts. It was a strange request, but the board members agreed. When they arrived, they found a dusty old hall, folding chairs, and plastic tables. There were no bodyguards, no press, no cameras. It's just Sophia and a box. As they sat, she placed the box on the table and opened it. It was filled with documents, some printed, some handwritten notes she had quietly compiled over the last 2 nights without telling anyone. Inside were property records, private correspondences, meeting logs between old banking officials and unknown third parties. Patterns emerged, deals made in silence, companies formed overnight, permits pushed through without inspection. Look here, Sophia said, pointing to one set of papers. This building, now listed as a private security firm, was originally registered as a public reading library under my grandfather's lease. 2 years after the lease expired, it became a storage facility for classified data. The lease was never renewed, the land never purchased. Someone stole it quietly. The room was silent. She went on. And this one, now a tech hub for an artificial intelligence firm funded by offshore investors. Do you know what it used to be? Community bank built with local donations and managed under a family trust. The original trust was under Devereaux's name. Again, no transfer, no payment, no record of sale. One of the board members, an older woman named Greta, leaned forward slowly. Are you suggesting these companies are ... connected? No, Sophia said. I'm saying they were placed. Deliberately. Like pieces on a board. Each one using land that was meant for something else. And whoever's behind it knows that if I continue tracing this line, they won't just lose property, they'll be exposed. Marianne, pale and tense, finally spoke. This is getting bigger than any of us expected, Sophia ... I need to ask. Are you in danger? Sophia smiled faintly, but her eyes didn't. If I am, she said, then it means we're closer than they ever thought we'd get. That evening, Elias took extra precautions. The car changed routes 3 times. They turned off phones, even contacted a private security firm he trusted, one that owed him enough favors to act without questions. But Sophia couldn't rest. Not yet. She kept thinking about the box of unanswered letters, the buildings that had changed names and owners without ever changing deeds, and most of all about the letter who wrote it, who was watching. That night, she sat alone in her grandfather's study, now relocated piece by piece into their home. The same chair, the same desk, the same smell of old paper and faint tobacco. She opened a drawer and found one final envelope, hidden beneath the wood lining. She hadn't seen it before. The handwriting was her grandfather's. She opened it, her heart slowing. Inside was a single-page letter. My dear Sophia, if this letter has reached you, then the world has done what I feared it has turned silence into. Policy, you were never meant to carry this burden. But if you are reading this, it means you were born for it. I hid things I could not fight, but you are not me. The world is not the same. They may try to scare you. They may try to break you. But remember this, the truth is not a sword. It is a mirror. Show it to them. Make them look. And if you ever feel alone, know this. Someone is always watching. Not just to threaten, but to protect. Raphael Sophia leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes. Outside, the wind had picked up. The city hummed below. She called for a press conference, not at the bank, not at City Hall, but at a park in open space that her grandfather once fought to preserve before it was sold and paved into a parking lot. The press didn't understand why they were meeting there. They came anyway. Sophia stood on a small wooden platform. No microphone, no podium. Just her, a map. In truth, years ago, she began, my family was erased from records. Because we were wrong, but because we were inconvenient. Today, that ends. She pointed to the map. These lands were never for profit. They were for people, for community, for purpose. And I intend to return them to that purpose. Porters leaned in. I am officially launching the Devereaux Foundation, she continued, to recover, restore, and return the land stolen under. Silence. Not just to claim what was mine, but to give back what was taken from everyone else. One reporter shouted, but aren't you owed billions now? Sophia smiled. Then let the billions be used to build something real. Not towers, not vaults, but trust. The crowd fell silent, but far behind them. A man in a gray coat watched. He made no noise. He took no notes. He simply nodded once and walked away. That evening, another letter arrived at her home. This one was handwritten. You were warned. You kept going. Now watch what happens next. And underneath that line was a photo of someone Sophia hadn't seen in years. Someone she loved. Someone who had disappeared. Someone everyone thought was dead. Her brother. The brother in the shadow seat was just a photograph. A single image. A grainy still. Printed on paper that smelled faintly of chemicals and old ink. It showed a man sitting alone in a dimly lit room. His face was angled slightly, but Sophia knew that face better than her own. His shoulders, his hair, even the way he held his hands. It was unmistakable. It was Lucas, her brother. He had vanished 12 years ago. Under strange and painful circumstances, gone without a trace. One day he was there, full of ideas, laughter, and quiet strength. And the next, his apartment was empty. His phone disconnected. The police had found no leads. There were no fingerprints, no video footage, no farewell, only silence, or family. Broken pieces that year, and though they moved on, none of them ever truly healed. Now, here he was. Not in a memory, not in a dream, but in front of her. Alive. The note that came with the photo was short. He saw too much. Just like you. Careful where you dig next. Elias stood frozen across the room, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the image. We need to find out where this was taken, he said. The lighting, the wall, anything we can trace? No, Sophia interrupted softly. We need to find out why. By midnight, their private team had scanned and enhanced the photo. The background revealed more than expected. Fragment of a sign in the corner, operated by MVS. Another clue. Faint shadows on the floor indicated a barred window to the left. And then, a symbol, etched into the Tebla Company logo, long thought to have gone defunct. Maurice Vanguard Systems. A private security contractor that had been blacklisted a decade ago after multiple scandals. This company disappeared off. The map, Elias muttered, scrolling through the data. But they didn't die. They changed names, buried records, restructured under shell firms, and guess where their original office stood? Don't answer. She didn't need to. Elias turned the map around. On your grandfather's land, it all began to come together like pieces of a painting she'd been working on for years without knowing what the full image was. The missing land, the erased records, the sudden disappearances, and now Lucas. Shay had uncovered legal lies, but beneath the financial fraud was something deeper, something human. Shadow network that had used the land not just for profit, but for hiding people, secrets, failures. She closed her eyes, trying to remember the last conversation she had with Lucas. He had mentioned something then. Something about old bank documents he had found in a storage unit he rented near the harbor. Land records, unused permits, notes in code. He thought it meant something big, thought it might explain why certain small banks were closing without reason. But she had brushed it off. Was too busy, too exhausted. A tear slipped down her cheek. He was the first to see it. Elias walked over and gently rested his hand on her back. And now you're the one who can bring him home. The next day, Sophia returned to the bank, but this time she didn't come for a meeting. She came with a letter, a formal declaration, a list of every parcel of land that had been wrongfully absorbed, a demand for full audit of all operations tied to those lands, including any activity involving Morris Vanguard Systems or its successors, and, most importantly, a request for legal cooperation with international investigators. Marianne read the letter with trembling hands. Do you know what you're doing? Sophia nodded. Yes, I'm giving you a chance. The kind my brother never got. News spread fast. Headlines exploded. Bank scandal expands into international cover-up. Missing people. Secret firms. In one woman's war for the truth, Sophia Norwood demands full investigation into underground financial dealings. But what the world didn't know, what not even Elias knew yet, was what Sophia had decided. Quietly the night before, she would go find Lucas herself. Not with an army, not with cameras, but with memory, instinct, and an old map he once scribbled. On a napkin, the last time they sat together eating street food on a rainy day, the map led to a warehouse on the edge of the city, abandoned, forgotten, windows boarded, gates rusted. It's the kind of place no one questions. Elias had begged her not to go alone, but this part of the story, this part had to be hers. It was dark when she arrived. The wind howled low and steady across the broken asphalt, cast long shadows on the rusted fence. She climbed over carefully, heart pounding, each step measured like a prayer. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. And then, behind a metal door at the far end of the hall, she heard it, a sound, barely a breath. She pushed the door open, and there, in a small room lit by a single hanging bulb, sat Lucas, older, thinner, eyes sunken but alert. Hands cuffed to the chair but not defeated. Sophia, he whispered, as if the word itself was too big to say. She ran to him, dropped to her knees, and touched his face. It's me, she said through tears. I found you. They said, you would never come, he whispered. They said you'd give up. Then they never knew me. Lucas had been kept for years by those who feared what he knew, shuffled between places, threatened, watched. He had gathered secrets, names, proof, and now, with Sophia's strength and Elias's power, the world was about to hear it all. A week later, the largest press conference the city had ever seen took place. Elias stood behind the curtain. Lucas sat at the front row, guarded and safe, and Sophia stepped to the podium not as a victim, not as someone seeking revenge, but as a woman who had walked through silence, laughter, threats, and shadows. They laughed. She said calmly into the microphone. Then they warned. Then they tried to hide. And now they will answer. The world stood still. In that moment, she was not just a foreigner, a wife, or an heir. She was the voice of every truth that had been silenced. Epilogue: within 3 months, multiple resignations rocked the financial sector. Investigations unearthed. Records of abuse, fraud, and human rights violations. The bank issued a full public apology and pledged half its assets toward reparation programs. The Devereaux Foundation became one of the most respected institutions in the world, dedicated to restoring stolen land, uncovering buried records, and empowering the unheard. As for Sophia, she walked through the same glass doors again one morning. No guards blocked her. No laughter echoed behind her. The marble floor reflected her steps, now not as an outsider, but as the rightful owner of a story no one could ignore. And this time, when she stepped inside, everyone stood.